Ladies and gentlemen, when you're a criminal, it all depends how you're looking at it. If you're a criminal that only benefits yourself, you're not really a criminal. But this guy was a lot more than a criminal. He was one of the key players to help the American expansion of the NHL become what it was in the 1920s and 30s. So today we're going to be talking about the guy that they call affectionately Big Bill, Big Bill Dwyer. Now, William Vincent Dwyer, born February 23rd, 1883 in Hell's Kitchen, was an early Irish-American Prohibition gangster and bootlegger in New York during the 1920s. He used these profits to purchase sports properties, including New York Americans and Pittsburgh Pirates of the NHL, as well as the Brooklyn Dodgers of the NFL. He eventually was brought down by the U.S. government through legal actions, leaving Dwyer financially strapped at the end of his life in 1946. Now, of course, the Pirates moved to Philadelphia, become the Quakers in 31. Now, born to Michael and Margaret Dwyer, he was raised in Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of Manhattan. Dwyer became one of the leading bootleggers during the early years of Prohibition. In a heyday, he reportedly ran a fleet of 20 runners. Now, Dwyer was working as a dockyard stevedore hired by friend George Shevlin prior to the announcement of the Volstead Act in 1919. With access to company-supplied trucks, garages, and other valuable resources, he quickly dominated bootlegging in Manhattan within a year. His network of garages were able to hide large numbers of supply trucks, which, accessible only by secret doors and compartments, were known only to Dwyer and several others. Now, eventually breaking away from Shevlin, Dwyer had organized a smuggling operation which ran from Europe directly to Manhattan. Forming a partnership with Oy Madden and later Mafia Don Frank Costello, Dwyer soon began taking on future gangsters such as Lieutenant Vanny Higgins and others. Through James J. Hines, Dwyer was able to gain the political protection of Tammany Hall, as well as members of the New York Police and Coast Guard, enabling Dwyer shipments to be delivered to the coast without interference. However, in 1925, Dwyer was arrested for attempting to bribe members of the Coast Guard during an undercover operation by the Prohibition Bureau and was sentenced to 2 years in jail. After 13 months, he was released for good behavior and slowly began to withdraw from bootlegging, instead investing his money into legitimate businesses, including legalized gambling ventures, such as casinos and racetracks, as well as sports teams, owning a football squad and, again, the two ice hockey squads. By the end of Prohibition in 1932, he had retired from bootlegging and lived with his wife and 5 children in Belle Harbor, Queens. He died there in 1946, age 63, of a heart attack. Now, in 25, Tex Rickard convinced Dwyer to obtain an NHL expansion franchise to play in MSG, and he named the team the New York Americans, paying $75,000. With a fortune made in Prohibition bootlegging, he handed out lucrative contracts, including a 3-year deal to Billy Birch, rumored to be worth $25,000. Shorty Green also received a huge raise, his salary going from $3,000 to $5,000. This was a time when most NHL players were said to make about $1,500 or $2,000. He took an active role in owning the squad, often trying to rig NHL games. For example, he put a goal judge in that would call a goal against an opponent merely if the puck touched the goal line. It happened one night in 27-28 when Ottawa was in Madison Square Garden. However, the goal judge seemed more interested in taunting Ottawa goalkeeper Alex Connell. Connell finally butted the goal judge in the nose, which caused Dwyer's buddies to seek Connell's net that night. It took a police detail to get Connell out of the gardens that evening, and at the train station, someone inquired if a gentleman was Alex Connell, and Connell replied and said he was not, knowing he was in danger. Now, the Americans flourished, and Dwyer secretly purchased the Pittsburgh Pirates of the NHL, using ex-boxer Benny Leonard as a frontman, who appeared to be the team's owner. The team folded in 1930 as the Philadelphia Quakers. In 1930, Dwyer also purchased the NFL's Dayton Triangles for $2,500, relocated them to Ebbets Field, and renamed them the Brooklyn Dodgers. He bought the team with Jack Delper, a former player for the NFL's Orange Tornadoes. By the end of the 32 season, he had enough of professional football. The Dodgers had cost him an estimated $30,000 in just 3 years. The team was then purchased by 2 former New York Giants players, Chris Cagle and John Sims Kelly, for $25,000. Now, in 1936, the U.S. government won a big lawsuit against Dwyer, leaving him virtually penniless except for his ownership of the Americans, and he was losing money here also. Just before the 37th season, the NHL took control of the Americans. to control the Americans. Now, at this point, it was interesting how it was going to play out. Now, they claimed that the financial status of the squad was critical. Dwyer filed a lawsuit against the NHL for this, but the NHL settled by letting him own the Americans in 1937 to give him time to pay his debts. Now, Red Dutton, who was a manager coach of the squad, lent Bill $20,000 for the team, and Dwyer promptly lost it all in a craps game. When, at the end of the season, he could not pay the debts he owed, the NHL ordered the team under its control. Now, in 1929, Dwyer acquired the Coney Island racetrack in Cincinnati. He allowed operations through bootlegging partner Dutch Schultz in 34 and 35. Now, Dwyer had cut a deal with Ed Strong of Cleveland for Peter Horbeck to purchase the racetrack when it was a receivership on July 20, 36 for a $5,000 down payment. On September 1st, 1936, the deal was finalized and paid in full in the amount of $95,000. The same day, the track was sold by Peter Horbeck to River Downs Incorporated of Cleveland. Now, in 31, Dwyer became a founding partner in the Tropical Park Racetrack in Coral Gables, Florida. Now, by the end of Prohibition in 32, he had retired from bootlegging and lived with his wife Angus and 5 children in Belle Harbor, Queens. He died there on December 10, 46, the age of 63. Now, during his time in Miami, journalist Barbara Walters lived at his home for a brief period. Walters wrote in her autobiography, and it hasn't been confirmed left or right, that Dwyer shared a bedroom with his chauffeur and stated it seemed somewhat logical that Dwyer was gay. Where would he find the time, ladies and gentlemen? So despite the fact he was a bootlegger and an NHL player, owner and an NHL enforcer off the ice, according to Barbara Walters, he found time to be gay despite 5 children and a wife and hanging with Dutch Schultz and all these, what he called highs and lows of the New York Mafia. A very interesting life. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing here, we're at our Hockey Vintage Podcast. Let us know what to like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, keep your stick in the ice. Thanks for listening. Bye.